Hey, hello, howdy, and however I greet you when I meet you. It's time for the second episode of Get in Tune, a musical talk show. Today's guest is me. I am running a solo show, and to be perfectly honest with you all, because I need to be perfectly honest in order for it to be a successful show, is that I was dreading this. This is like take number 9 because I've been stuttering and stammering. I don't know what to talk about by myself consistently, a singular topic for a whole hour. So I thought I'd kind of walk you all through my thoughts for the week. So I'm really big on learning new repertoire. So I sat down this week and I own a specific version of the real book. For those of you that don't know, the real book is a fake book. And what is a fake book? A fake book is a collection of lead sheets. What is a lead sheet? God, it's a vocabulary test here today. So basically, a lead sheet is a piece of sheet music that basically has the melody of a song, which is the part that most people know, the part that's sung or played by the lead instrument. It can have the words unless the song is an instrumental piece, and it has chords. For my non-musicians there, chords are basically like the bones of what's being played musically. Like there are a bunch of notes going on, but I can tell you, oh, well, we're playing a C major chord, and that tells you all the notes that are being played at the time that a person is singing. Usually, this is a very rough, very generalized explanation. So, fake books are collections of lead sheets, and the real book is a collection of jazz tunes, usually. And this company that I really enjoy working with as a teacher called Share Music, SHER Music, has a book called The New Real Book. And it has a lot of the more updated jazz tunes. It has the old classics, but it also has a lot of fusion records. And oh my God. I'm going to share the playlist with you all. It's The New Real Book Volume 1. I made it on Apple Music and I'll make it on Spotify later this week. It put me onto some tunes by Al Jarreau and some people I hadn't heard of really. I might have heard of Jeff Lorber in passing. One of the guys on here, one of the tunes in the New Real Book Volume 1 is Desire by Tom Scott. Let me tell you all about Tom Scott. When I moved to Atlanta in 2021, it was still pretty much under COVID restrictions, so there wasn't a lot of live music happening. And I went to this jazz jam. I think it was the first one back. And the cats weren't talking to me because I was new in town. I looked like I was new in town. I wasn't really talking to them because I didn't know anybody. And this guy walked over, and apparently he'd been flown in from out of town to come give a lecture at Georgia State. He was a really cool guy. He was a saxophone player. He was older. Um, I think he was bald. I have the video, but I don't have time to stop recording and go look at it. But he got on stage and he played the bejesus out of this saxophone. I mean, he just laid in. And it wasn't the notes he was playing. He wasn't playing some crazy bebop solo with 1,012 notes in every phrase. But he was just so secure that he was just singing through his instrument. He was so well rehearsed. He was so learned, I guess, so knowledgeable. You could tell, you could just tell from his playing that he really understood the craft. And it showed because he was singing through this saxophone. And I met him and he was really kind to me. And I had the video. And then a couple days later, I was scrolling through Instagram. No, I wasn't. I'm lying to you all. See, I told y'all. I got to be super honest. I was scrolling through TikTok and a video came up of him miming playing sax to Saving All My Love for You by Whitney Houston. I think it was that one. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. It was him. It was Tom Scott. He played on the original record. Let me give you a little bit about Tom Scott. Tom Scott was born on May 19th in 1948. He's a saxophonist, composer, and arranger. He was a member of the Blues Brothers And he conducted music for Dragnet and Lassie. He worked with Quincy Jones. He worked on Starsky and Hutch. Excuse me, he wrote the theme song for Starsky and Hutch. And he's played on all these records. And he was so kind to me. And so he's become a reoccurring face. It's like that thing where you learn about something and then you see it everywhere. Well, he had this tune called Desire. You should all check it out if you like jazz. It's called Desire by Tom Scott that I stumbled into this weekend. And I'm going to go on a lot of tangents today, so bear with me. When I was studying this real book and I was really getting a grasp of the kind of artist I wanted to be. I'm also in this branding class through Grammy University. And it says to look up artists who you'd like to model yourself after. Who sounds like you, who presents like you, who does what you want to do. And lately, in the past few years, I've been really leaning into jazz because I feel spiritually unfulfilled by R&B. I don't feel a release after singing an evening of R&B. I still feel so full. I still feel like that thing inside of me that makes me want to do music is still full. I haven't emptied it at all. Doesn't matter if I sound good or not, I still feel full. And it brings to mind that song by, oh dear God, thank you, Caitlin, rest in peace, for introducing me to the song I'm Available to You by Milton Brunson. And for those of you that have never heard it, the line that plays in my mind over and over again says, my storage is empty and I am available to you. And so I like to live my life as a performer trying to get to that point. I feel as though I need to pick the right music and construct a show that makes me feel empty when I'm finished. I need to feel as though I have poured out my cup and spoken what needs to be spoken and said what needed to be said musically to my audience. And I am now ready to be refilled with more music to give to them. That task is a little harder when I'm not a songwriter. And so many people ask me why I don't songwrite. Simple. I don't enjoy it. I don't articulate myself in that way very often. For my own musical filling, when I feel overwhelmed in a way that only music can relieve, I go to the piano and I sit and play. I may hum, but I don't think of words. Normally, when something is bothering me, I can come up with the words to say to the person about the thing that's bothering me and rectify it in that way. So I'm not a songwriter, but I've been sitting and looking at my artistry, and I was particularly intrigued by Diane Reeves, who I got to see live last year, thanks to one of my friends. Her mother invited me. Shout out Lori Williams. And it was life changing because her voice was like butter, and she sounded like no one else. She kind of reminds me a little bit of Sarah Vaughan, but she sounds like no one else. She sounds like Diane Reeves. And lately, someone else put me onto Al Jarreau. And Al Jarreau was all up and through that new real book, volume 1. They had so many of his tunes that stuck out to me that I was like, oh, this is different. This is like fusion. It's like, it's not smooth jazz because it's definitely super, super complex, but it's not straight ahead. It's not me sitting and crooning in a lounge kind of music. This is like, oh, I kind of feel like a rock star singing this. He's got songs called Easy. The other one that came through is, oh God, come on, get my brain together. Boogie Down. And I've been listening to a bit of him lately because he's an artist that I had not been familiar with previously. I think my first realization that Al Jarreau was killing is that McDonald's commercial he did with, was it Patty Austin? Probably not. He did a jazz. No, it was Al Jarreau and Vesta Williams did a two all beef patties, bacon sauce, lettuce, cheese. Oh no, no, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. That's what it is. Bacon sauce. Two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. They have a video of them kind of trading fours and scatting on it. And I was like, this guy's pretty good. And then someone told me to study his version of Spain by Chick Corea. They told me to study his version of Spain by Chick Corea. And everything that people have been telling me to look into has sort of been culminating at this time in my life. Al Jarreau is all in that book. Tom Scott, that I bumped into when I first decided I really wanted to be a jazz singer, he's in this book. And so when I'm looking for new repertoire to learn, I take note of these serendipitous discoveries, these moments that remind me of these other moments that I've had. Another thing that's been sitting on my mind this week, aside from learning new repertoire and exploring my own artistry, is fear. I keep thinking about being afraid. Doesn't help that I definitely have an anxiety disorder, but I'm very cognizant of moments of fearfulness. Why? Because I'm a teacher. And I feel as though it's my job to come off as sort of fearless when I'm teaching my kids. I was talking to one of my students, and she was learning Taking Chances by Celine Dion. And the chorus of that song is, what do you say to taking chances? What do you say to jumping off the edge? Never knowing if there's solid ground to hold or no, never knowing if there's a solid ground below or a hand to hold or hell to pay. And she was singing it so lofty and beautifully. And I'm like, girl, if you wanted me to jump off that cliff with you and you're singing it like, I can show you the world, I'm not going. I don't trust lofty people. I need you to be fearless. I need it to be rocky. I need it to be powerful. I would need to be like, yeah, okay, I'm terrified, but I'm going to jump with you. And I realized that encapsulates my teaching persona is to be fearless. You know, no matter what my students are singing, I sing it with them. I go with them note for note. They're belting it, I'm mixing it. They're in their head voice, I'm in my head voice. I'm going to figure it out with you. We're going to dive into this thing fearlessly and head first. Because I'm still learning to understand the voice. But I have to be fearless in doing so. And I have to negate my own fears of not having a degree, um, not considered a formal teacher because I don't have a degree, even though I do so much reading on pedagogy and I consult my teacher and I read textbooks and I attend virtual conferences about understanding the voice. I still have that latent fear because I don't have that piece of paper. And that fear isn't just in my teaching, it's also in my performing. I have stage fright. I have dreadful stage fright. I mean, shaking in my boots stage fright. You can't see it because I've kind of gotten a hold on the way it visually presents as far as me shaking. But oftentimes I have to tell myself, it's okay, get up there and sing the song like you wrote it. Get up there and sing it like they've never heard the song before, and you're just going to give it to them, which is especially terrifying when you go to a jazz jam and you give, tempo instructions and the key, and then everything else is left up to chance. When you go to R&B jams, 9 times out of 10, they're just going to play the record, which is a little comforting, except when you want it in a new key. Jazz jam, you can get it in a new key. They know the changes, but the interpretation is going to be so interesting and mysterious, and it's terrifying. I think it scared me to the point where I kind of rest upon the same tired standards when I go to these places, which then is why I sat down and started looking for new material, hence the first part of this conversation. But I'm conquering that fear. Wow, did you hear all the confidence leave my voices. I was about to say I'm conquering that fear. I was about to say it fearlessly. I'm conquering it. I'm not conquering it with all that machismo in my voice, with all that Wagnerian heroism in my vocal inflection. I'm not conquering it that way. I oftentimes go like, wow, this shit is terrifying. But it doesn't matter how scary it is. It doesn't matter how terrified I am of the audience's perception of me. It doesn't matter how terrified I am that no one will like me. First of all, that's a stupid thought. I wouldn't have 1,800 followers on Instagram if nobody liked me. I wouldn't have 2 followers on Instagram if nobody liked me. These big generalizing thoughts are so damaging to us as artists, which is again why I try and affirm my students and guide them fearlessly and try not to make any broad generalizations. I try and meet them where their voice is and explain things to them that way. Because generalization is so dangerous. Generalization and comparison together are so dangerous. Oh, I don't sound like such and such, so nobody's going to like me. That sounds ridiculous. But we all have that. Nobody's going to like it. Oh, I can't put this out. Nobody's going to like it. Oh, I shouldn't get on stage and sing even though I've been practicing for years because nobody's going to like it. It's going to come out and sound terrible. And I almost feel like a hypocrite when I get up in front of my students and I'm like, well, girl, don't worry about that. Boy, don't worry about that. Just get up there and do it. You're going to be afraid. I'm afraid now. And I tell them that while I'm teaching. I'm like, yeah, I get nervous teaching you all. Doesn't matter. I have a job to do. And I've had to start approaching my performances that way. Clue in Wednesday. Wednesday, I went to a jazz jam and I called a tune called Till There Is You. And I'm pretty sure I normally sing it in E flat. So there were bells on a hill is the key I think I normally do it in. So if that's E flat, even though if you have perfect pitch and I'm wrong, mind your business, bum bum. They called the tune in A flat and I wasn't paying attention. And so I ended up singing in the stratosphere. There were bells on a hill. And I went, oh my God, this is too high for me all of a sudden. Didn't catch the mistake. Couldn't afford to be afraid. Couldn't afford to stop the band once I realized that they were in the wrong key. I just had to go with it and say, okay, well, use all the technique you know how to and make this listenable. It's not going to be fantastic, but it can't be a terrible experience for the listener just because you weren't paying attention when they started playing in the key that wasn't the key you called. And so that thought of, doesn't matter if you're afraid has been living in my mind this week. Doesn't matter if you're nervous. It doesn't matter if you're scared. What matters is you have a job to do. And I hate to think of what we do as a job. I hate to think of making art as a job. But when you're in a performance art, that's a job. When you're making something for someone and they're paying you to do it, that's a job. The album I make is not my job. The album I'm making as an independent artist is not the thing I'm getting paid for. Someone else is not commissioning this work for me. Someone else has not put money into this work. This is my passion project. This is my passion. My job is when I have to get up there because people have paid money to see me. People have paid money to experience good music. And I have to treat it as such. So I learn new repertoire and I face my fears. Okay, I'm tying this all in together. This isn't a terrible show so far. We're about 20 minutes in. But yeah, fear has been really, 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 really prevalent on my mind. And then I'm afraid I'm not practicing enough. Because I'm not practicing enough. Because after I stopped that challenge, I haven't been practicing enough. When I do practice, my practice is much more efficient than it has been. And part of that is another thought I've been having this week. I need to reinstitute my yoga. When I teach my lessons, I'm very big on stretching our bodies because your voice is inside your body. And I said this when I was in college. I was like, I'm not going out there in that storm And the school shouldn't expect me to go out in that storm to walk down the street and go to class, which is such a lazy, assholic thought. But it does have its pros. I said, you wouldn't expect a guitarist to just walk their guitar down the street in this storm. I don't have a hard case to put myself in. My clothes are still going to get wet. My face is still going to get wet. I'm not in a hazmat suit walking to class. And I was like, my whole body is my instrument. Now, I was only thinking, if I get sick, I'm not going to be able to sing. But I've been discovering with my vocal coach that my whole body is, in fact, my instrument. This muscle pain that I'm having in my lower back right now is holding on to some of my high notes. It's creating tension for me in my posture. It's affecting the way that I breathe. My flat footedness has something to do with it. The way my ankles bend in and out has something to do with it. It's been an incredibly enlightening journey with my coach, actually. And my body is my instrument. So I've stopped drinking caffeine. I don't drink alcohol. I just recently gave up sweets. Eventually, I'll get to giving up fried food as well. But this week has been about learning repertoire and facing fears and challenging yourself, challenging myself, not just to learn new music and face my fears, but to do little things like that. In the past, I've tried to quit everything all at once, and it made me utterly miserable, and I've burnt out in a blaze of glory or a blaze of terror, really. I just went back into all the things. But I found that giving up one thing at a time, giving up caffeine and giving up alcohol and everything else, and giving up sugar, processed sugar, anything sweet that comes in a package, any cake, any ice cream, any of that. That sugar is the hardest thing to give up. But giving up one thing at a time and allowing my system to adjust to the deficit has been helpful. And singers, give up the things that don't make you feel good. I say this of all performers, really. But I don't think people that sing realize how important our internal balance is to our external presentation. I have consistent high notes now. My range has been very consistent since I cut alcohol and caffeine out of my life. For the longest time, my range was so different from day to day that I was like, oh God, I got to feel it out. Can I do this in this key today? And I still have that latent fear in the back of my mind. But I have evidence to the contrary now. I had to change the way I sit. I sit with my knees apart. I have to sit with them together now to support my abdominal muscles when I'm trying to breathe properly while I'm singing and playing piano. So that was a lifestyle change, even if it seems like a minute one. When I'm singing, okay, my knees got to come together. When I'm on gigs, be mindful of what I eat. I'm allergic to chicken now. It's a new allergy. I can't eat chicken. It makes me sick. Makes my throat feel a little closey and it makes me sick. I gotta avoid tomatoes. Oh God, I gotta cut everything hedonistically good out of my life in order to better myself on this journey. But I then turn around to ask myself, what is the point of learning new repertoire and facing my fears if my body's gonna fall apart while I'm trying to sing it, while I'm in the midst of facing those fears? So that's what a lot of my thought has been this week. Been thinking about facing fears, been looking at new repertoire, been looking at rebalancing my life. And I've been messaging people. I got some cool guests coming up for the podcast. I think I'm going to round this episode out today to 30 minutes because if not, I'll just keep rambling. But I want to sort of summarize everything I've been talking about. So I started out talking about repertoire and then started talking about artists. But to get back to the repertoire of it all, so I stopped in the F's of this book, this first book, and it's 75 songs. It's 6 hours and 8 minutes of music. Do I want to learn all those songs? No. Am I going to learn all those songs? Absolutely not. There's no way. But in endeavoring to find this new repertoire, I have found things that sound like me. I have found things that sound like the me that I want to be. I am discovering things about myself. I'm hearing things that I've never heard before and go, I want that for me. I want that sound. I like that melodic construction. I like this writer. And I take a note. And then if I like it and it's scary, I learn it anyway. These algebra pieces are crazy. I have to learn them anyway. I have to learn them in spite of that fear. I have to learn them out of, to spite that fear. I am learning a lot of music to spite the fear. This week was my last week at my residency. I was singing at this steakhouse in Atlanta. And to test myself, I started singing things in their original keys and adjusting to make them sound good. You see, I had set myself up serendipitously for this Wednesday that would pass, where I called it in one key and it got played in another. I had been forcing myself to sing things in keys that weren't necessarily the perfect or most comfortable key for me. Not because I couldn't, but because I needed to challenge myself. I needed to learn how to use my technique on the fly. And after listening to myself at my residency and listening back to the performance I gave at the Jazz Jam this week, there are still things I want to work on. But because I had previously challenged myself, I was prepared for this week. And I also learned through this residency that I don't find R&B fulfilling. I say learned. I've thought that for years. But I've had this sort of, I hate to generalize this thought, but I've had this sort of thought that, well, you're black, you should sing R&B, which is so silly. It's so stupid. And we're going to have a whole episode coming up about R&B once I get at all the statistics and the facts that I really want to talk about. But I felt like because of the spaces that I keep, I should be singing R&B. And it's just not for me. It's not my wheelhouse. I'm not comfortable with it. I may sound good to you all, but again, I don't feel empty. I don't feel like I've poured it all out. And I challenged myself to still be good, even though I wasn't pouring myself out. To the point where someone this week accused me of lip syncing and walked up closer to hear if the voice was actually coming out of my mouth, which is about the highest compliment I think I've ever gotten. But this week, I would say the theme of this week was challenge. To challenge myself, to open my mind, to become aware of the things I need to challenge more, to become self aware of the things I've challenged up to this point, how they're paying off. And even this podcast. This podcast is a challenge for me. I opened this up with I was terrified because what the hell am I going to talk about? And the part of my brain that feels afraid feels like I've been rambling for 25, 26 minutes. But I haven't. I've been sharing my experiences and hoping that the way in which I process things changes things for you. Another challenge this week. My students were being challenged to move more. My adult professionals in artist development. My boss wants them performing. And I wholeheartedly agree with her. And I said, you need to move. And one of my students has Master Blaster by Stevie Wonder. And baby, he was standing there step and clapping. And I'm like, you gotta move more. You absolutely have to move more. And I got up and I don't move a lot. I don't dance a lot when I'm on stage. I'm very aware of how I feel in my body. And so I tend to be stationary. But I had to get up and face that fear and say, look, you got to move. You got to feel that music. I had to move to the beat myself. So he would have some sort of leadership, some sort of guidance, some sort of reference point for what he needed to be doing. Talking to you all, I've realized that the word of this week is challenge yourself. That was the motto of this week. And that needs to be the motto of this season of my life. And maybe some of yours too. Challenge yourself. What is in your control to challenge, to redirect, to retrain, to reprogram? What can you do to challenge yourself? Challenge yourself to discover new artists. Challenge yourself to listen to a genre that you've never listened to before. Challenge yourself to try singing something that you've never tried to sing before. Challenge yourself. Challenge your mind. Keep yourself teachable. So that's all for this week's episode. I'm challenging you to challenge yourself. That's how you can get in tune. I hope that something I said this week resonated with you. I hope that some part of my story from the last week resonated with you. Tune in next week. I'm going to be interviewing one of my very good friends who is an outstanding independent artist and is really making a name for himself. But that's all for tonight, today, tomorrow, this morning, whenever you're listening to this. Have a good one.